I've been remembering this core moment of my childhood. When I was growing up, we spent a lot of time with my grandpa Gene, or Sir Grandfather, as he liked to be called, feeding the geese. My mom kept this giant bag of birdseed in her trunk, and even when my grandpa was really ailing, we would drive up to the pond. My grandpa would sit in the front seat and watch as we got out and threw birdseed to grateful honking birds for what seemed like hours. My grandpa had this superpower. He could look up in the sky and know exactly the number of birds flying overhead. Always, in an instant. He would look up and say 39, 17, 23. Meanwhile, we were going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a minute later, we'd come up with exactly the number he had known all along. I loved my grandfather. Still do. I loved all the time we spent with him. But I did not love birds. My mom and my sister got super into it, and they used to spend hours together learning the different birds' names and their calls and their colorations and how they look when they're flying. I had no interest. I did not want to learn more. And I developed this defensive strategy. They would always be, wow, what a beautiful bird. Do you know what kind of bird that is? So I would say definitively, that's a mongor. And if you say that in public company and people don't know, they'll think you're really smart, and then you can talk about something more interesting. If you say it with people that know, they'll laugh, and then you can still talk about something more interesting. When Edgar was born, we named him after my grandpa Gene. It's funny to me, because when I talk to soon-to-be parents about how are they thinking about naming their child, about the different possibilities, I always tell them that when you name a child after an ancestor, it's so much more than a name. Jewish tradition teaches us that each one of us accrues blessings that outlive us. And so when you name a child after an ancestor, it's like giving them a spiritual trust fund. They have access to all of the blessings, all of the mitzvahs that ancestor performed in their lifetime. And they have access to their own mitzvahs, their own blessings that they're going to earn on their own with a great interest rate. Eder today is 17 months old. He is running and talking and learning all new things and just beginning to express himself forcefully. He loves, what does he love more than anything in the world? Birds. He's obsessed with birds. The first thing he wakes up in the morning, bird. We drive to daycare, bird. Pick him up from daycare. We can't leave if there are any birds eating seeds in the parking lot or cleaning up after the kids and their snacks. Every night we go walking through the cemetery, bird. If I need time, he watches a YouTube video of birds, and 20 minutes in, he's still surprised every time, bird. He only knows a few words, the normal mama, dada, more, ball. But bird words, he knows goose and owl and eagle and pigeon and crow. And pigeon, he knows their sound. Sometimes he just sits in the corner cawing. I wouldn't be surprised if one day he looked up at the sky and just noticed, 17, just like his grandpa. And all of this makes me wonder, did Eder just come into the world with his own unique love of birds? Or is it possible that he got that love of birds directly from my grandpa Gene? And if it's possible that he got that love of birds directly from my grandpa Gene, then is it possible that each one of us has our own version of that? That each one of us moves through the world drawn to things that are not just our own interests, that our passions and proclivities are not so much inherent, but inherited? I raise this today because Sukkot is not just the festival of booths. Sukkot is also very much the festival of ancestors. Every night as we sit in our sukkah, we invite ushpizin, literally guests, but really ancestors from our tradition. And as my Rabbi, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalom Yalav HaShalom would teach, we're not just inviting them in theory or for their company alone. We're inviting them because each ancestor has a specific lesson to teach us. Every day of the holiday, we are focusing on specific attributes that we need to learn in order to become the best versions of ourselves. So for instance, today, we're focused on the attribute of chesed, of loving kindness. Today, we invite into our Sukkot Avraham Avinu, who we remember was sitting there at the opening of his tent when he was in his most physical pain, looking out to see if there were any people that he could welcome and support and guide. And we welcome, according to the Shita of my Rabbi, Miriam, who as a young girl watched over her little brother at the Nile, making sure that he would be taken care of, making sure that he would be safe. And we invite these ancestors and we ask them, please be with us, help us to open our hearts, to have more compassion, to have more loving kindness. And you don't have to stop there. There's a tradition of inviting your own ancestors, members of your family who may have passed on, who exemplified this quality, people that you know in the world. Sukkot teaches us that even when our loved ones have passed on, they're still here. Our ancestors are calling to us and through us in every single moment. And I'll tell you a story. I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, and I davened there at the Orthodox synagogue. They started their davening at 8 in the morning. And I remember there was this group of students that came one Shabbos. And, they weren't Jewish. They were in this world religion class at a local university. And they came to services right at 8. And I was watching them through the service, trying to figure out, what were they thinking? Did they enjoy the service? Could they even follow along? And I watched from 8 to 9 to 9:30 as curiosity turned to boredom and then some. And then we got to Musaf, and the cantor started singing, and out of the back of the sanctuary, I hear this sob. One of the students had burst into tears, and she was crying so loudly that she had to leave the sanctuary and actually left the synagogue. That was it. She was gone. So services finished, we went on. It was weeks later, I saw her again. She came back alone. And again, she came right at 8, and again, she sat through the whole service. And again, the cantor sang the same melody, and again, she burst into tears. Only this time, she smiled and cried and smiled and stayed. At Kiddush, she shared her story. She said she grew up going to a church and she liked it. It was a nice community. She always felt like she had good friends there. She never really felt any profound spiritual connection, but who does? And she said, she's taking this world religion class. She comes to services and all of a sudden she hears this melody and it's as if she's heard it before. It's as if she's coming home. She can't believe it. She's so overwhelmed with emotion that she leaves. She calls her family, she calls her mom and her grandparents, and she shares with them about this very emotional moment that she had, and her grandparents are surprised. And they say to her, I don't understand, we haven't been Jewish in a very long time. It turns out her family had fled the Spanish Inquisition and decided generations ago that they were not going to be Jewish in order to protect their children from anti-Semitism. This young woman said, I feel like I'm coming home, like I was meant to be here. But she said, I just have one question. Do you think it's possible that my ancestors sang that melody when they were Jewish? Sukkot teaches us there is so much more to this world than what meets our eyes. Just like our Sukkot are open to the sky, to the stars above, so too our souls are open to the voices and teachings and blessings of our ancestors who are calling to us and calling through us in every moment. Chag Sameach.